in seeing him?
Well, not as in seeing him, but since we've had a close association, of course, our former coach, Leigh Matthews. Welcome, Leigh.
Chris and Nick, yeah, nice to thanks for the invitation to come in and talk about that little book. And I just said to you, there's about a third of the book is about the era that we shared it.
Little book.
Collingwood.
It's about 2,200 pages.
There's a lot to get in.
I struggle to read there on some.
I lived a long life, so it's a long book.
Now, well, let's talk about it. It's called Accept the Challenge, and
Well, you know where that name came from, Chris.
I do.
You remember me? You repeat the story, because I hope you can at least remember what it was all about.
Well, grand final day.
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to?
That's right.
About accepting the challenge and understanding probably three or two aspects of the game: the appreciation or the exhilaration of victory, as opposed to the depression of defeat.
That's what competition is, isn't it?
That's what competition
and
is.
to take it on, you've got to accept that challenge, because you lose a lot as well. You might hope you win, but you're going to lose a lot.
And I think a lot of people, when you use the word depression in footy, let's not go down the life depression.
Yeah,
so
sure.
it's about the winning and losing aspect.
the other thing that I remember vividly from that day was the fact when you said, whatever happens today, the sun will come up tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which was I think a real. I was a calming influence, certainly with me, because I think one of the challenges of grand final day as a coach, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because I've never coached a grand final team, but is because everyone's so up and the anxiety levels are really high, and the pressure of the moment, it's about trying to just relax and just say it's not the end of the world.
Right back in 1978, when it was my fourth grand final with Auckland, David Parker, just before the game, about 15 minutes before the game, he cleared the dressing rooms, told everyone to shut up, told all the players, lie on the floor, do a little bit of calming visualisation. And I always look back on that point and I thought that was the calmest I ever ran onto a field on grand final day. And so I've always had this view that on grand final day, it's not hyping up, it's about calming down.
Yeah.
So my view as a coach was the best I could do as coach is to try to keep the environment calm for the players, and therefore trying to release the anxiety and pressure is part of that process.
I reckon that changed when Tony Shaw spoke. I'll never forget his lasting words.
Yep.
I've been to two, and there's no way known I'm going to make this a losing third.
Well, that was after the second semi.
Was it then? Yeah,
that was after.
They were really strong words to me that galvanised our group.
Yeah, 2 weeks before. That's different. That was going in, but that was Shawry's words after the second semi when we'd actually then qualified for the grand final. Yeah.
What do you see as your greatest football achievement?
Fortunately, there's a lot that I guess you've been not so much achievement. I mean, the fact that actually.
What gave you the most? What is there? Look, you achieve so much, but is there one that overrides in terms of your sense of achievement?
I think given it's funny. I only ever coached because I couldn't play anymore. I mean, you can't play anymore. How do you stay involved? Well, you go coaching. But funny, and therefore on match days, I mean, you sort of win most of the time. But the team wins as coach. All you feel is relief, really. You don't feel a whole euphoric experience. But it's funny, on grand final day, like I heard Kevin Sheedy say this once, that the 4 times we won grand finals as coach were more euphoric and exhilarating than any of the sort of almost the ones you played in. But clearly, because when you're playing, you got your individual performance going on in and around the team performance. You still got your individual pride in how am I playing compared to how the team's going. So therefore I look back on because Collingwood hadn't won for a long time, so being part of the experience of that, and then being, I guess, the first of the Northern States frontier clubs to win when the Lions won in 2001. So those 2 moments were as good as I've experienced in my time.
That's the positive side of it, Leigh.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to ask this, and I never had. What was the Ron McEwen situation like when I looked around the rooms and I thought most players thought that he might be taking his place in that 1990 grand final? Yeah. He was stripped.
Yeah.
How did you deliver the message that he wasn't playing?
Well, this was the second semi, of course, so it wasn't a grand final. But I mean, that was. I always have a belief that if you know you made a mistake, don't accentuate it by not remedying it. And when we selected the side, I mean, it was funny how when I wrote the book, it made you think back on things that had slipped out of your mind. Like Peter Dacos going into the second semi had a sore calf. And even on the morning of the second semi, which is a Sunday game, we weren't positive whether Dakes would be available or not. Right? So in terms of picking the side, we hadn't given enough due consideration to the fact that Essendon's main forward at the time, of course, Chris O, was Paul Salmon. You were by far our biggest, best big defender. So that was an obvious matchup for us. And when I got to the ground, and an hour and a half before the game, and put the names up on the board of the Essendon team and my team, Collingwood team, all of a sudden I thought to myself, oh, who's Ronnie going to play on? Who's Ronnie McEwen going to play on? And I couldn't find an Essendon matchup for Ronnie McEwen, given that you were going to be playing on Salmon and Craig Kelly was going on. And I thought, oh no. I mean, it was sort of, it came crystal clear that the balance was wrong. Craig Starcevic, who was more running, tall running forward, who might well have replaced Dakes anyway if Dakes wasn't available. So I just realised I'd made a terrible error in judgment. But then the team had to come first, and poor old Ronnie had to take the bad news, an hour and a half before the second semi that unfortunately going to have to pull you out at the last minute. I mean, I always said to players, I mean, I know it's only words, listen, we're taking the 25, well, it's probably only 21 then, wasn't it? So we're taking 24 to the footy, and anyone under 24 could play, but it's difficult for the individual. But it's funny, I guess I was callous enough from the team point of view. I think I know it's difficult for the individual, but I know I'm putting the team first by backing your judgment. So you have, I guess there's many things like that, Mick, you have over the years. I mean, you're coaching, you're different, you have different situations that you have to try and find the best of the alternatives.
Talking about being callous, does that come to mind when you had to do what you did with Alan Richardson?
Yes, exactly the same. I mean, I was saying with Nigel Lappin 10 years later before the 2003 grand final. My view always is if a player has got to be, if he's going to break down, he's going to break down at training. You're not going to break down the first 5 minutes of the game because that's been, betraying the team course, really. So, therefore, the fitness tests of players going into grand finals were going to be sort of more brutal and more demanding for me than even in a normal home and away game.
I often tell the story about Alan Richardson about that fitness test because for those that haven't heard the story and don't know the situation, he broke his collarbone in the second semi-final, and remarkably, all of a sudden Thursday before the grand final, he turned up to train. I think we're all shocked and sort of, mate, what are you doing? What are you doing? He got, I mean, on a Thursday night, the session was pretty comfortable, just getting everyone's hands right, etc.
15,000 people watching.
Correct.
Which is unusual.
So he got through training, and then, and look, this is my memory of it, but you decided that you would be the person to conduct the fitness test, and you had a couple of front-on tackles. He tackled, you tackled Leigh, and then we were all watching on the sideline, and we were all amazed that it looked to be getting through. Then you said, okay, and you pat him on, we couldn't hear what you were saying, and then you started walking off, and then you grabbed him and dumped him.
Yeah, he had to be able to take contact when he wasn't expecting it.
And then he got up and he couldn't move.
He was a bit sore, and basically I said to him in front of him, there was 15,000 people.
You read back his collar.
There was 15,000 people looking at the fitness test, and they all voted for Richo. So it's not like
was that predetermined, Leigh? In your mind, walking
well, I didn't think it. I mean, broken collarbone. You don't play a week and a half later after broken collarbone, and so.
But were you predetermined in actually throwing him to the ground?
Well, no, it was one step at a time. First of all, he did the ball skills okay. I thought he seems to be moving okay. His arms operating okay. Then we did the physical stuff, and he seemed to be getting through that. I thought, well, the final thing is some contact when he's not expecting it and not ready and not braced for it. He looked like he's still okay, to be honest. And I said, listen, we'll have a look at this tomorrow morning. But he came to me on the Friday morning and said, no, I know it's not right because it's all from the fitness test.
And it's just, I mean, we hear lots and lots of stories about players injured, suspended, going to grand finals. But he was a wonderful player that year and would have thoroughly deserved his spot.
No, he was a permanent in the side at that point of time. It's funny how when you say the good fortunes of the footy gods, as I often call them, I mean, the guy that was available was Shane Kerrison, who actually would have been in contention for that back pocket position. I mean, Richo would have played it because he was the incumbent and playing well. But we had a very good replacement for the one position that wasn't available on the day.
Leigh, obviously in this part you're talking about team first, really.
Yes.
As opposed to individual, these are the things you have to decide on.
Yeah.
McEwen, Richardson come to mind.
Yeah.
What about the recruitment of Nathan Buckley? Is there a contradiction there in a way, in the view that you put 10 players as invincibles, and then to get Nathan Buckley, the individual of the club, to make us better, did you put or ostracise other individuals that were on the list who'd had success with you and us?
Well, I mean, you didn't think you were doing that at the time, but when in the look back of what this writing the book process was, it turned out that from after the 1990 Premiership team until Bucks came at the end of 1993, about half the Premiership team had sort of left the club, been retired or left the club for one reason or another, and then, the chance to recruit Nathan Buckley came in, but the price of that was, there was 10 players that Brisbane couldn't select from, but any other 2 players they would get apart from the early draft choice. And I look back at that and I think, I mean, he was a wonderful player for Collingwood for a long time, Bucks, but I'm not sure whether it was great for the karma around the team at that point. Now, Mick, you were there, so you've got an answer to that question if you're looking at the recesses of your soul.
Oh, absolutely. When we were in Bali,
the
news got filtered through,
yeah.
and this list and this email come through, or whatever it was, not fax or whatever it was. We got some sort of correspondence, and there was this list, and there were some guys on that trip that weren't on that list, and straight away they started to question their self-worth.
Exactly.
And that's what really probably become a little bit of a fragmentation within the group dynamic, which is so important in a footy team, particularly when you've achieved something as a group previously.
Yeah.
And it was always going to be an interesting part going forward, how it was going to be handled, whether you're going to lose one of your best players, your heart and soul players, and obviously those decisions had to be made.
Well, part of that also, the 2 things weren't totally connected, but it meant that we couldn't offer Peter Dacos the 1994 season. Dakes wanted to play on, and we thought, it was a bit like Shorey and Dakes were the 2 real veterans, and we didn't think we could take both into 94, and we decided to take Shorey in, and therefore Dakes couldn't. Now, people probably, he would have connected that some way or another with the Nathan Buckley coming probably, and maybe his teammates did as well. And I do look back on it and think, well, Collingwood got a wonderful player, but I don't know whether it was great for the karma and the unity of the team in that changing period, sort of post-premiership in the early 90s.
We'll get to a break, come back and talk more with Leigh Matthews and the book Accept the Challenge. It's Talk Away.
Yeah, that was an interesting tool. Because that premiership team, you